Hello and welcome to something a little bit different. This time, instead of doing a walkthrough, I'm going to do my all-time top 10 Spectrum games. The top 10 that I'm going to use I have actually published before, so when the guys at Retro Gaming Roundup did their top 10 Spectrum games, a load of people of course posted on the forums, no, I don't agree with that, here's my top 10, and if anyone wants to disagree with my top 10 and post their own, feel free. The whole point about listening to these things and doing top 10s and things like that is that if everyone had exactly the same top 10 it would be a bit boring. So here's my top 10, they're all good games, I'm sure you will agree, but they're probably different to a lot of other people's top 10s. So my number 10 is going to be Chaos by Games Workshop. This game really is multiplayer mayhem of the best possible kind. You can play against the computer, you can play against your friends, you can even let the computer just play against the computer. It's absolutely brilliant. The game premise is really simple. You have between 2 and 8 wizards on a single screen and they have to battle it out until they are the last one standing. You can think of this game as a kind of chess game where instead of you starting with all the pieces, you actually have to create the pieces by spells. So there are numerous spells in the game. Some are just plain offensive ones, as a magic bolt and a lightning bolt spell. Some create monsters, so you can summon anything from a vampire to a red dragon, and anything in between. You've got really difficult to cast spells, such as the Gold Dragon, and you've got easy to cast spells such as the Giant Rat. Then there are spells that affect either the game board itself or the wizard themselves, so you can cast something like a gooey blob or a magic fire, which will slowly increase and spread out through the board and kill all kinds of wizards and people on that board. Or you can cast spells on your wizard to increase their effectiveness at combat. Magic shields, magic bows, magic armour, magic sword. The spells that you have 2 alignments. They can be either chaos or law, and the more chaos spells that are cast by all the wizards on the board, the more the spell atmosphere, as it were, becomes chaotic, and similarly with law. So the alignment of the board can change from chaos to law and back again, and the more chaos it is, the easier chaos spells are to cast, and the more law it is, the easier law spells are to cast. Now in this game, the graphics aren't anything special, it's all played on a single board, it's not like it's a huge game world or anything like that, but where this game really stands out is a multiplayer game. You can play against your mates. It's particularly good if you've been down the pub and you come back, you're not quite ready for bed and you just want to have a nice competitive game of wizards. There's nothing better than thinking, I'm at my end here, I've got one last chance. Somehow managing to get a line of sight to your opponent in a move and then casting your last spell, which is something like a lightning bolt or a magic bolt, firing at them fingers crossed and watching them explode just before their dragons and vampires were going to bear down on you. So there it is, my number 10, Chaos. Number 9 is Attic Attack by Ultimate Play the Game. I'm not actually going to say too much about this game, as I've still to record a voiceover for my walkthrough of Attic Attack. I'm probably going to record a new one because I can actually complete Attic Attack pretty much every single time I play it. It's not a difficult game once you know the map. This was one of the 2 first games I ever got for my Spectrum. On Christmas morning of 1983 I came downstairs and there was a ZX Spectrum. I didn't know I was getting a ZX Spectrum. I didn't think I was getting a ZX Spectrum. I really thank my parents for buying me one. And I got 2 games with it. I got Spectral Panic and Attic Attack. And I will confess that Spectral Panic, which a lot of people don't like, was the one that got the most play. I played Spectral Panic quite a lot because it was quite simple, it was easy to grasp, it was easy to get hold of. But Attic Attack I got into slowly over those Christmas holidays and started to play more and more. It is an absolute superb game. It is one of the first of those big maze games with different levels and really good graphics, pretty good sound actually. There's some sound in it, which Spectrum games were never well known for their sound, but the sound in Attic Attack sounds good. The spot effects, but they're good enough. There's a little bit of flicker on the sprites, there's a little bit of attribute clash, but this is a Spectrum, what do you expect? So there you go, that's my number 9, Attic Attack by Ultimate Play the Game. My number 8 is Rex by Martech Computing. As with Attic Attack, I'm not going to say a lot about this game because I have recorded a walkthrough of it, and at some point I am going to do a voiceover for that walkthrough. But I think if I was going to say anything, if I was only going to say one thing, it would be that you're an armed rhinoceros slaughtering humans to save your civilization. And what you've got to remember is, this was back in 1987, before we knew so much about global warming and climate change, and people were quite so worried about biodiversity and the fact that we're making things extinct. But it's a very interesting premise that actually the humans are the aggressors and you're the downtrodden animal hero trying to save your planet. The killing humans theme leads to one of the best score multipliers I've ever seen. So certain of your weapons fire bullets, and if you kill a human and then keep riddling them with bullets and watching their dead corpse twitch as you pump more lead into them, you get a score multiplier. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's a really good way later in the game to actually rack up a load of points, but more importantly, extra lives. And you really need those lives in this game. This is a difficult game. As I say, I'm not going to say too much about the mechanic, I'm going to leave it there, but it's really well worth playing. If there's anything I've wanted to do while I've been doing my Spectrum videos, it's encourage people to play different games than the games that I show on my walkthroughs and on this top 10. I would really recommend anyone who hasn't played this game to try it. It is absolutely excellent. This is actually one of those games that I think would benefit from a kind of modern 3D makeover. I can just imagine the trailer now. It actually starts with the humans. You're actually looking through the eyes of the humans with your fellow humans around you, and one of them suddenly gets shot and gets thrown back and is riddled with bullets. And that's the score multiplier mechanism. And in 3D you turn and look, and then someone shouts, "Here he is," and you see this huge big armed rhinoceros lumbering towards you, and as you shoot the rhinoceros, he actually puts his shield on and the bullets start bouncing off the shield. That is a big part of the original game. But what would then happen is, instead of you continuing to look through the eyes of the human, the camera pans round and you go into the eyes of Rex himself, and you hear, I don't know, a voice saying something like "shields at 50%", and actually you then view the game from Rex's point of view rather than the human's point of view, and it becomes apparent that actually the humans are the aggressors and you are this armed rhinoceros. I could see that making quite a good game advert anyway, even if it didn't make a particularly good game. It would have to be done in the same style as the original game. So that's my number 8, Rex. My number 7 is Starquake by Bubblebus Software. So before I start talking about Starquake, I'll just say one thing. I have an aversion to games where you can die unfairly. I was either going to put Attic Attack or Saberwolf into this top 10, and it ended up being Attic Attack, basically because in Saberwolf you can die unfairly. When you're going to enter a room from above or below, sometimes one of the natives in Saberwolf will wander in and just kill you. There's nothing you can do about that. It's random, so there's no pattern you can learn. There's nothing in the game that'll help you, and you can't react quick enough. It just happens sometimes. And what Saberwolf does to make up for that is give you lots and lots of extra lives. You can play the game very, very carefully and avoid it and minimise it, but sometimes you still die unfairly. Starquake is a bit like that. Very occasionally you can die unfairly. But despite that, it is such a good game, it still makes it into my top 10. And, like Saberwolf, Starquake also gives you lots and lots and lots of additional lives. Now, something of a theme with this top 10 is that I'm not going to say a particularly large amount about the game and how to play it or anything like that, because I've recorded a walkthrough for Starquake and I want to record a voiceover for that at some point in the future. Going back to the comparison with Ultimate games, I actually think that Starquake is probably the best game that looks like an Ultimate game, not actually made by Ultimate. It obviously has similarities to Underworld in that it's a very, very big vertical map and you have gravity in it and you can drop, but if anything, the gameplay mechanics better than Underworld in that the way that your robot blob moves around is much easier and much easier to navigate around the whole map. Then there's the way that you collect and drop objects. You get things like keys and doors that you can open with that key, so that's very reminiscent of Attic Attack. The way that you can just pick up and drop an object absolutely anywhere as well is quite reminiscent of Attic Attack. And finally, I think Blob himself has a little bit of a look of the Alien 8 robot. They've got that kind of cutie looking robot look that is similar to Alien 8 and is similar to Starquake. But this game has so much more. It blends those things into an absolutely excellent game. It has some unique features of its own. Teleportation, the hover pad that lets you move around so easily. And it's just a really, really good game. A maze, collect them up, achieve the objective game of the highest order. If anyone hasn't played this, I really, really highly recommend you to go and find it, seek it out and play it. There's an elegance and a fun to playing it as well that you'll just enjoy. You will find that occasionally you'll die and you'll think that wasn't my fault, that was the game's fault. There are one or two unfair deaths, but it does give you lots and lots and lots of extra lives. If you go and look at my playthrough, at one point I have 24 lives and I think I finished the game with 22, so it isn't like there aren't extra lives aplenty to make up for that in this game, and actually that's such a small criticism and it happens so infrequently that, well, it really makes up for it. So that's my number 7, Starquake by Bubblebus. My number 6 is Set Willie by Software Projects. Now this is a departure from the top 10 that I posted on the Retro Gaming Roundup website, because in that top 10 I actually had Manic Miner in number 6, and I love both of those games. They're both terrific. I've played them both a lot, but recently anyone who's a regular viewer of mine will have seen that I've completed Set Willie and recorded a voiceover for that walkthrough. And in doing that, in all the practice and the play that I had to put in for Set Willie, I actually found that I really, really liked it and really enjoyed it, and I got to appreciate the game just that bit more. It's a terrific game. It was really appreciated back in the day, and really appreciated back in the day. It got Crash Smashers, it was always critically acclaimed. And the funny thing is, I've never been a 2D Mario game fan. I like some of the later ones, I like some of the DS Mario games, but Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario World and things like that I was never particularly into, and I think the reason is because I discovered platform games with Manic Miner and Set Willie, and for me they were the original and the best. I don't like the momentum that you get in a lot of platform games these days, because I like the kind of pixel perfect timing that you needed with Manic Miner and Set Willie, and the little skills that you needed to develop don't actually translate very well to a platformer that has that momentum. But that's as an aside. I know loads of people love those games, and I do actually play them, and I do quite enjoy them, but I don't think I love them in the way that I really, really love this game. Of course, the other thing about this and Manic Miner is the absolute genius that was Matthew Smith. The screens look gorgeous. All the sprites are really, really good. I don't think there's one bad sprite in either of the entire games. There's nothing that you don't look at and think, yeah, that's a work of art. The Nightmare Room, for example, the flying pig, that was just a stroke of genius. Strange that someone would choose to turn into a flying pig in their nightmare, but the rest of the room makes a lot of sense. It is a nightmare, by the way. It's one of the most difficult. And I don't really think there's a lot more I can say about it that, as I say, I haven't already said. If you want to know my opinion and know a lot more about the game, please go and watch and listen to my walkthrough of it. It took a lot of practice to be able to do that, and The interesting thing is now I'm actually failing miserably at the nightmare room in this piece of video. When I came to record it, it was really difficult to play again because I've been playing Jet Set Willie 2 for so long, and Jet Set Willie 2 is a very similar but different game, and because of the different speeds, it's slightly faster in most rooms. I actually found the timing of this room really difficult. Yet, if I played Manic Miner, I wouldn't have found that because they both have exactly the same speeds, and it's that consistency as well that I think is something really good and really beautiful in this game. So there's my number 6, Jet Set Willie by Software Projects. My number 5 is School Days by Microsphere. In School Days, one of the best features was the fact that you could just wander around causing mayhem at school, something that I'm sure a lot of us would have liked to have done but didn't actually do back in the day. Another terrific feature is that you can rename the pupils and teachers in the game, and I'm sure loads of us renamed those pupils and teachers to teachers that were at our school. I remember in particular Mr. Withit looks a little bit like a teacher who was in my school called Mr. Johnson, so if we were renaming the teachers, Mr. Withit would always be called Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson wasn't a geography teacher, by the way, but he did look a lot like Mr. Withit. Now this is becoming something of a theme, but I'm not going to say an awful lot about School Days. Up to now I think I've had 3 games where I've got a video on my channel that I haven't recorded a voiceover for, and one that I have. In this case I actually have a video of me completing School Days. I just need to record the voiceover and put it on the channel. So I'm not going to say a lot about it, but as with Jet Set Willie, it's hard to find things that haven't been said about it. It's been quoted as one of the original sandbox games, the forerunner to Grand Theft Auto. Now, I must admit, I don't play Grand Theft Auto. I haven't played a lot of it. I did buy Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories for the PSP, and I didn't play it an awful lot. I did a couple of missions, but I didn't really see why there was all the big fuss. And maybe that's because I played School Days when I was younger, and the ability to just wander around, do what you want, break the rules if you want to break the rules, obey the rules if you want to obey the rules. I'm sure in Grand Theft Auto you could drive around very sensibly, obeying all the traffic signals and everything else, and not getting into any trouble at all. Which, funnily enough, becomes the boring bit. And one thing I will say about School Days, and I'll probably say this when I record my voiceover for the walkthrough as well, is actually playing it like you want to complete it is pretty boring, because you've got to be really careful and not get too many lines off the teachers, which means going to your lessons and being good, which kind of seems to almost defeat the point of the game. You've got to defeat the point of the game to complete the game. But as I say, I'm not going to say too much more about that because I will record a voiceover. So there's my number 5, School Days by Microsphere. Number 4 is Chuckie Egg by A&F Software. So finally, another game where I'm not actually going to record a voiceover for, so I can say a bit more about. There is a video of me on my channel playing Chuckie Egg and getting 1 million points, or slightly over 1 million points, which I did a while ago for the highscore.com website, and I got the world record on that site. So for everyone who voted my score legitimate on that site, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It took me 2 hours to get to 1 million points on Chuckie Egg, and it was a pretty long slog. It was one Friday evening as well, so it took me quite a while, and it was quite late by the time I'd finished. In Chuckie Egg you play Henhouse Harry, and basically you look like a leg with arms, legs, a head and a great big hat, and your job is to run around the screen and collect a dozen eggs, and to stop you there are various enemies. There are bluebirds which move in a semi-random set pattern. I say semi-random because sometimes it can change slightly. I think it also changes depending on whether you're on the first or the second screen. I think it's something to do with the seed that's scattered around the screen. You can collect the seed as well, which gives you a few points and also stops the rate at which your bonus and your timer go down. So cunningly collecting the seed can help you get a bigger bonus. The bonus is interesting because it goes up quite rapidly, and as you get to later levels, basically you get an extra life on every single screen because of how big the bonus is. You get an extra life for every 10,000 points. So if you think of that, getting 1 million points meant that I got 100 extra lives, so I died over 100 times on that game. You start the game with 5 lives, so that was at least 105 lives I have, and I actually think it was 114. In the game, there are 8 different screen patterns that just keep on repeating, but in each repeated pattern there are different enemies, or there are for the first few patterns of 8. In the first 8 screens you have the bluebirds that move around in the semi-random manner I've mentioned. Then in the second 8 there's a bird that's caged in the first 8 that is then released, and that bird will home in on you. It's quite slow at first, but it has a lot of momentum, the bird, which means that it can kind of be very, very slow and quickly catch up with you, but if you do a quick turn then it confuses it. Then you have the original bluebirds and the big bird, then you have extra bluebirds and the big bird, and finally you have double speed extra bluebirds, so the same as the previous 8 screens, but the bluebirds are going at double the speed, plus the big bird. And then things get really, really hectic, but this game is really, really hectic anyway. My name Willie might have been the Manic Miner, but Chuckie Egg is a manic platform game. From the moment the big bird is released, you just have to keep on moving. From that point on, which isn't very far into the game, it's only after the first 8 screens, which don't take too long to complete, then you just have to be constantly on the move. Jumping, ducking, weaving, whatever it takes to make sure that that bird doesn't get you. And then when the bluebirds come along again, that restricts where you can go, so you've got to be thinking ahead. I find that when I'm playing Chuckie Egg, I'm thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead at least, and it just makes for manic, chaotic fun. I remember one Christmas a few years ago, my brother came to my house for Christmas, and we basically spent the entire Christmas spending Chuckie Egg. It wasn't that long ago. There were loads of other games we could have played, but we just played Chuckie Egg again and again and again. We were playing the 2-player and see who could get the highest score. That's actually when I honed my Chuckie Egg skills to the level that they're at now. And for the last 3 years I've been to Play Expo and got the highest score on Chuckie Egg of anyone there. And talking to Winston, the guy who runs the stall at Play Expo, one of the things it's interesting to hear him say is he's tried different games, but the 2 games that people really seem to play are Chuckie Egg and Manic Miner. And I actually think out of those 2, Chuckie Egg is the most popular. It certainly is with me anyway. I'll admit I don't play it that often these days, just because it takes me so long to complete a game. I tend to practice for a few weeks before Play Expo to go and play there. But other than that, I tend not to play it a lot, just because it takes so long. If my brother comes again this Christmas or another Christmas, hopefully we can have another tournament and play. At the moment I'm listening to the Retro Gaming Roundup November 2014 edition, and their current top 10 that they're debating is the top 10 games that you've played the most. And I've just realised, as I've been saying that and saying how much I've don't play Chuckie Egg now but have done in the past, that actually my top 10 are pretty much the top 10 games that I've played most in my life. That's certainly true. They might not be in the exact order, but I think actually these last 4 games, so this game and the next 3, are pretty much definitely the games that I've played most in my life. So with that, let's get on to number 3. Number 3 is Elite by Firebird. Boy, have I spent a lot of time playing this game. This was another game I got for Christmas, some 29 years ago in 1985? And when I got it, I had to load it 4 times before I actually figured out how to get the lens lock little thingy to work. I loaded it up on Christmas Day really, really eager, and by the time I actually got into the game I was really, really frustrated. I don't think I played it a lot. That Christmas morning I think I went off and played something else, but then over those Christmas holidays and then over the weeks and months after that, I played it a huge amount. It was absolutely fantastic. The trading, the space combat, all of the different worlds that you could visit. It really captured my imagination in a way that few other games have. I would literally sit in my bedroom for hours on end playing this game. I'd be the pilot, and a friend of mine from school called Stephen Mugridge would be my co-pilot, and what he used to do was work the missiles, energy bomb, escape pod, ECM for me, and it was kind of like having voice activated missiles. For example, I'd just say target missile, he'd target one, I'd say fire missile, he'd fire, and as a team we slowly built up the rating from harmless to competent. And at that point I came undone in two ways. The first way was that actually I stopped saving the game. So what would happen is when I was competent I'd go out and go bounty hunting, shoot a load of ships and never get any advancement in my rating because I never saved it. I'd just go out, play for a while and save it, and for months on end I did that and thought, why aren't I getting to a higher rating? But later on I realised it's because I didn't save my progress. The other reason I came unstuck was that my poor old rubber-keyed Spectrum that had served me well for years and years and years finally came to an end in 1986. And for a while I was without a Spectrum, but I saved up pocket money and did jobs and things like that to save up for another Spectrum. And when I bought a new Spectrum, I actually bought a +128, the toast rack model, which I'm really pleased I did because they're quite sought after these days, and I still have that machine now. But the original Elite wouldn't load into that Spectrum. There was a incompatibility with the original game, probably because it was so complex and took up so much of the memory of the Spectrum, and it just wouldn't work. So for a while I was Eliteless. But then I think there was a 128K version that came out, and I actually got that on a compilation with a few other games, and I started playing it again. Next time I realised that I needed to save my progress, I got to Deadly. And while I really enjoyed playing it that second time, and I've actually played it emulated since, I played it on an emulated Spectrum, making sure that I saved my progress, and I think got to Dangerous. Those first few months playing Elite, where Steven was being my co-pilot, really were the most fun I had playing the game, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was the sense of exploration, exploring these strange galaxies, reading all the sometimes humorous comments that the planets would have against them. For example, I'm pretty sure you can get planets that are populated by furry killer students or something like that. Of course, I know now that that was all procedurally generated, so it was just as likely to be furry killer hamsters as furry killer students. But at the time it made the game feel really immersive and absolutely immense. I remember thinking, did someone really go through and think up all these things for all these different planets? Of course, at the moment, I guess Elite's quite topical with Elite Dangerous coming out. I backed the Kickstarter as many people did. I haven't played the game, as I guess many of the backers, particularly those who backed it for nostalgic reasons, probably haven't yet. I will go and play it. I will download the game and play it at some point in time, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I don't think anything could capture that feeling that I got when I played it back in the day, back on my old rubber key Spectrum with my co-pilot, exploring this amazing galaxy. So that's my number 3, Elite from Firebird. Number 2 is Alienate from Ultimate Play the Game. If a recent World of Spectrum poll is anything to go by, then this actually is a bit of a controversial choice. The poll asked people which was their favourite isometric game, and the choices were Nightlaw and Alienate and Batman and Head Over Heels. Nightlaw won by quite a margin, second was Head Over Heels, and Alienate came joint last with Batman with only 6 votes. One of which was my vote. Now don't get me wrong, out of all 4 of those games I've played and enjoyed every single one. I remember when Batman first came out playing it quite a lot. And as I said in that poll, I actually think the Bernie Drummond's John Rittman games are different from the Ultimate games, because the Ultimate games to me are more 3D platformers, they're more isometric platform games. I actually think that Alienate is the closest thing to a 3D Manic Miner that you can get. Whereas John Rittman's games seem to be much more puzzle based. Batman was good, but I think some of the puzzles were flawed, it was a bit unpolished. Head Over Heels definitely took that further. But for me, the best John Rittman 3D isometric game is Monster Max, which isn't for the Spectrum. It's a Game Boy game. And if you haven't played it, I'd encourage people to seek that out and find it. It's an absolutely superb game and takes that puzzle gameplay to the max. It's, for me, almost as good as Alienate, but for the Spectrum, Alienate was definitely my favourite 3D isometric game. And the reason for that is, as I said, it's more of a 3D platformer than a puzzle game, as with the John Rittman games. And as such, it was always going to be Alienate or Nightlaw that was my favourite, but I prefer Alienate for a few reasons. As I say, it's just that bit more polished. In Alienate, you have to basically know the map inside out and go around the entire map to complete Alienate. With Nightlaw you don't. I've got a route that completes Nightlaw where you only really get to about half of the map. And as well as that, I just think the Alienate robot is really, really cute. I do like Sabreman, and I like the way that he changes into a werewolf. I think that looks really good. But that whole werewolf mechanic does mean that in some rooms you can end up waiting a long time for Sabrewolf to change either into a werewolf or back into Sabreman to be able to complete the game. And without this game, you wouldn't be listening to me now, because it was actually Alienate that made me decide to start a YouTube channel and start putting videos on the YouTube channel. I'd learned the game, I think for the third time in my life, so way back in the day, I taught myself to complete Alienate. And then when I first got into emulation, I remember I had the Ultimate Collection, I was loading it into emulators via tape and taking snapshots, and then I started playing Alienate, got into it and taught myself to complete it again. And of course I forgot that, you do after a few years, and then quite a few years ago I relearned it and relearned to complete Alienate. And off the back of that I thought, you know what? There can't be many other people in the world right at this point in time who can complete Alienate. I should put my skills down in some way and just for the record, as it were. A bit like if you've ever heard Christopher Walken talking about the Weapon of Choice video. He says that he could dance and could dance really well when he was younger and wanted to get something down on video before his legs finally gave out. So with me, with Alienate, it was wanting to get something down on video before my brain and thumbs gave out and I wouldn't be able to play it and complete it anymore. So there you have it, my number 2, Alienate by Ultimate Play the Game. My number 1 Spectrum game is The Lords of Midnight by Beyond Software. It's difficult to put into words just how much I love this game and really loved it when I first got it. This was another Christmas game for me. In Christmas of 1984, 30 years ago almost to the day, I received this game, Daley Thompson's Decathlon, a RAM turbo interface and a Quickshot 2 joystick. I still have all of those with the exception of the joystick. Daley Thompson's Decathlon quickly put pay to that along with quite a few other joysticks if I'm honest. Similar to my story with Elite, I didn't play Lords of Midnight much when I first got it. I've been playing Daley Thompson's Decathlon, which is a great game. It would probably make it into my top 20. It hasn't come into this top 10, but it would make it into my top 20. And actually thinking about it, if people like this top 10, if they want, I'll do 20 to 11 at some point and do my top 20. Complete my top 20 by doing the next 10 games down. It's easy to find another 10 great games for the ZX Spectrum. I did load Lords of Midnight up on Christmas Day. I loaded it up and I put the overlay onto the keyboard and pressed some of the keys. I pressed north and assumed I'd moved north. I pressed north again, but the view didn't appear to change when I pressed north again, so I tried pressing north again and nothing happened. Then I pressed select and selected another character and thought maybe it was something to do with that. Maybe I've got to get them all moving north, so tried all of them in the north button and again nothing happened. And I hadn't read the manual at that point or even read the novella that comes with it, so I gave up, turned it off, put Daley Thompson's Decathlon back on and proceeded to try and destroy the joystick I'd been given as a Christmas present. And really what I started with was the background story. I picked up the manual and read the background story and was captivated quite instantly by it. It instantly added a depth to the world that really helped get your imagination going. And of course the graphics to the Lords of Midnight are absolutely superb, so they help add to that and really draw you into the world and get your imagination going. And that Christmas, it snowed at my parents, and the world outside was transformed into a world of white with a brilliant blue sky, and the fields and woods near my parents actually looked similar to some of the views that I could see when I looked through the eyes of Luxor the Moon Prince in the Land of Midnight. And in that land there were places with such fantastic and imaginative names: the Forest of Dreams, the Plains of Blood, the Mountains of Despair. This is of course a classic story of good versus evil. The evil Witch King Doomdark is trying to overpower Midnight, and Luxor calleth Morkin and Rothron must rally the Lords of the Free and defend Midnight from the evil foul hordes that he's just about to unleash on the land. And as well as the people, there are various things to avoid: wolves, ice trolls, dragons, and something called Skullcrin. From the Skullcrin's graphics, they appear to actually be vicious pink teddy bears, and I'd say to anyone, be careful of them, because although they look like pink teddy bears, they can be deadly. There's nothing more embarrassing than early on having Luxor, the great and mighty Moon Prince, and Midnight's only hope in its darkest hour, killed by Skullcrin. Dragons, wolves or ice trolls is just about acceptable, but don't get Luxor killed by some Skullcrin. Those of you who've watched my other videos will know that I always give a shout out on my videos, and I haven't on this one. Rather than that, I'm going to dedicate my top 10 to the memory of Mike Singleton, who sadly passed away in 2012. It was of course Mike who wrote this, and he passed away while developing the iOS version of the Lords of Midnight with Chris Wilde. So thank you, Mike. Thank you for bringing us all such a absolutely fantastic, immersive and fun game to play. I read once in an interview you said that you'd like to make a game that was still being played after you died, and with the Lords of Midnight you certainly achieved that. So there you have my top 10 Spectrum games. I hope everyone enjoyed that and it was interesting. If you liked it and enjoyed it, please comment, and if you disagree with it and have your own top 10, definitely please comment. I love to read other people's top 10s. So until next time, happy gaming!